how will we use AI in our practice? This is a very common, a relevant question for today and for the next few months and perhaps a couple of years. And various people have various answers to that. Let's examine this today. Welcome back to Think Design Work Smart. I'm Alex Bolboaca and I'm coming at you from the Mozaic Works studios. And today I want to talk about why Captain Picard has a British accent in the Next Generation. Because he's really a Frenchman. And normally what you would say is that this is because of the universal translator in Star Trek. But in fact, the question is more complicated because it's well established in one of the Star Trek episodes that French is a dead language within the universe. So he's not actually speaking French. So whatever he's speaking is translated to a British accent by the universal translator, or he learned a British accent, which is really confusing. It's one of the mysteries of Star Trek. Oh, I think we weren't talking about that. Although pretty close, because the Star Trek computers are kind of similar to what we are trying to have today with AI. So let's go back to our question, which is how will AI be used in software development, in software engineering? And there are many, many different answers to these questions. If you listen to people who are really passionate, they will say, oh, AI will replace everything. These are usually the people who have a lot to gain from AI replacing everything. Then you have executives who hope that AI will replace work, and so they go on using this idea and trying to replace people with AI. And this doesn't seem to work really well. It seems to have bits back and forth, so it's not really clear how things will happen. But what it's obvious to me is that we will use AI, and then we'll need to have practices that adapt to using AI in software engineering. And this is where this post by Simon Wardley comes in. Simon Wardley is a very interesting person. He created something called the Wardley Maps, a technique for strategy, but one of the ways it is used is to understand the current landscape. And so it's very connected to things like scenario planning or complex adaptive systems, because it shares commonalities with this, but the maps also show you a way of visualizing. And he posts really thoughtful things on LinkedIn. And one of them was recent, and I thought I really need to discuss this because it's very interesting. Now, usually he posts in terms of dialogues with X asking questions and him answering questions. So let's go through this and then I will explain a few things. X, why do you think that practices will take so long to co-evolve with AI? And we're already in an interesting point. Please notice the framing. The framing is not AI will replace everything. It's practices will co-evolve with AI. And this is very important. So let me ask you one thing before we move on. Which professions do you think will be safe even if AI gets really good at what it's doing? And I've thought about this, and I think there are at least two. One of them is people who deal with money. The other one is law professionals. Why? Because law professionals are the ones who will need to change the laws in order to allow AI to be used. So, why would you do that if it's against your interests? It's fairly clear. And the second one is people who deal with money because, where there's money, there's power. So they will have ways to deal with this. So even if you think that AI will replace everything, there are domains where it will be very tough for the practices to co-evolve. We often forget the social impact of these things. It's not only that the technology exists, but it's also that people have to use it, that people have to use it in a, let's say, positive way and not try to uh, either ignore it or just use it, just to consume tokens, or just even go further and sabotage it, like poison the data, the AI models, and so on. And even if you start to use it in a positive way, the next question is, which are the practices that work within the new ecosystem? Because the ecosystem is changing. The way we are writing software will inevitably change. The way we create software actually will, or even better said, the way we solve problems with software will inevitably change, but it's not very clear how. So this is why this framing is very interesting. The practices need to co-evolve with AI. That's the first premise of this. And then the question is, why do you think that practices will take so long to co-evolve with AI? Me, meaning Wardley, we are a couple of years into an 8 to 15-year window. That's not a long time. You are talking about social systems. The practices have to emerge and be accepted. We haven't even decided what the flag will be. Okay, forget about the flag for a minute. We'll come back to this. But the question is, again, couple of years into an 8-15-year window. That's not a long time because it's a social system. And why? Because 2 steps. Practices need to emerge, practices need to be accepted. What does it mean for practices to emerge? So how does this usually happen? Some people start doing certain things in a corner of the industry, and other people are hear about that and start using the same thing and eventually make the practice more common or more commonly used. Then practices start to merge between themselves because different corners will do different things. But eventually people need to accept those practices, and some practices will not be accepted while others will be. And this is irrespective of what executives want or what businesses want or what AI companies want. We're dealing with social systems. They are strong in themselves and they will evolve and co-evolve with AI as things move on. Because let's not forget, the other thing is AI companies want to sell their products, so they need to see what is used. So there's a selection bias happening there. There's actually a selection pressure happening there. And now let's move to the flag. We haven't even decided what the flag will be. Flag, X wonders. Wordly, think DevOps. Practices have to emerge and coalesce. This is all normal and is fairly quick compared to management practices. How long does that take? X asks. Wordly, 30 to 50 years for management practice. Take explorers, villagers, and town planners and these previous namings. This has taken 18 years so far. I did suggest back in 2015 that it will be another decade before the models start becoming more noticeable, and since then we've had the timely publishing of Suzanne Kaiser Architecture for Flow. It will take another decade to become occasionally used. A few words about Architecture for Flow. It's a book that links strategy, operations, and architecture, so tech. So it's basically about socio-technical systems, linking techniques from domain-driven design, worldly maps, and team topologies, which is basically how you organize your business, how you set the goals or the strategy, and how you make it work. So it's all 3 aspects. What we at Mozaic Works call the mosaic. This is the mosaic, the business, organization, and tech. AI isn't helping to accelerate this? Asks X. Wardley, not in the way you probably think. These changes don't move linearly but happen in fits and starts. This is another thing. We imagine that things will go linearly, or we might imagine, and honestly, I was afraid that this might happen, but it seems it doesn't, that AI will move exponentially. It doesn't seem so. It seems that we've reached the peak of the exponential change and now we are doing incremental change. But it's still uncertain because it seems to be working again. AI itself as technology seems to be moving in fits and starts. But when we are talking about socio-technical practices, yeah, they will go in fits and starts. There will be a trend, like there was a trend for microservices and it started, and then everybody was asking about microservices for a while. And then people started doing microservices, and now I think we are towards the end of that, and it will get replaced with other things. Yeah, and that's an example of things that got adopted in a, let's say, pretty linear manner, although it was much more popular in the beginning than now. But then you have things like extreme programming. If you look at the history of extreme programming, when it started, organizations were, and the literature of the industry was saying, of course that company is successful because they are doing extreme programming. And it lasted for probably a few years, because nowadays, when I say extreme programming, most programmers have no idea what I'm talking about, and I have to explain what it is. So you have this, but elements of extreme programming actually got into Scrum, got into software craft, got into AI right now because feedback cycles useful. Extreme programming was all about feedback cycles, and when you are dealing with non-deterministic code and knowledge generators, or let's say collators maybe, then you need this, right? You need this. You need feedback cycle. So we are looking back at extreme programming, even if we don't realize that. So it's fits and starts, right? It started, it had a fashion, it was a strong at some point, and then it kind of subsided. So these changes don't move linearly, but happen in fits and starts. So right now you have a bunch of CEOs getting rid of CIOs, getting rid of engineers because of fundamental misunderstanding of what the impact of AI will be. Yes, it is being driven by personal incentives, think bonuses and share options, based on reducing operational costs and improving profits. The smart ones know this, and so they'll take their ill-gotten booty and LinkedIn claims of successfully reduced the operation cost by X million and bugger off into the next organization before the trouble hit. Yeah, common thing. Because, so you see, these are systems that evolve based on the forces that press upon them. And definitely one of the forces is monetary. Higher profits, lower operational costs. Higher profits means good, line goes up, and then you do this and you move to the next organization, and you do this there and you move to the next organization until you've gotten the thing dies and people realize it doesn't work. But right now we're kind of in the middle of this. Now it's more complicated than that, because some of the layoffs were due to the end of cheap money, but that makes everything much more complicated. So we can focus on this post instead. Okay, and that helps how? It allows for a new set of CIOs to come and talk about how they spearheaded the strategic revitalization of a failing engineering department, aka introduce new practices. I was almost saying that I love corporate talk, but I don't. When I see this, I like speaking in simple terms. So they introduce new practices. So first, You fire people, and then a new generation of CIOs comes in and they say, oh, right, let's now introduce new practices because that's right how it happens. Does it have to be like this? That seems like a lot of pointless pain, right? That's the whole point of EVTP. So he's referring back to explorers, villagers, and town planners. But Alastin needs high degrees of situational awareness to work. Most organizations run on stories, instead they lack the practices needed. Yeah, I can show you a little bit about what EVTP is, but it's not that relevant for this. The important thing here is that you have mental models and strategic models, which is this EVTP, to avoid these types of things. But if you're always thinking short term, yeah, that doesn't work. I was using Claude Opus 4.6 to write a planning document, and it spontaneously included Wordly mapping in the plan design without being asked. Well, that's interesting. If these AI systems start demonstrating situational awareness whilst human execs fail, then, well, for whom the bell tolls? And next question mark. Most execs and organizations work on little to no situational awareness. There are either chancers, success is fairly random, or believers, focused on belief. This is fine if you are competing against others like yourself. In 2012, I ran a study of awareness and action in the niche hotbed of competition, which was open source tech of Silicon Valley. I examined the impact of market cap over a 7-year period. Awareness made a huge difference, but this niche is not representative of the wider industry. If you are talking AI is demonstrating situational awareness, then many execs are toast. Consider replacing execs with AI, you should get better results. And then culture, lol, I'm sure plenty of excuses will be found. So there's a lot to unpack here because he's talking about strategic methods and so on. But what I think we can take out of this, and what I am thinking first when I read this post, is practices co-evolve with AI, which means they interact, right? So it's not that an AI company is operating in a vacuum and they just push out things that they want to push out and it just works. No, they will always respond to market and market forces. And so the way we are using AI will shape the way we will use AI in the future. If you still believe that we can avoid using AI in the future, I think that's not feasible. We will use AI in the future. If you believe that AI will replace all software engineers, again, I think that's wrong. I mean, maybe in 100 years, but not immediately, not in the next, let's say, 10 years. We need to have this kind of co-evolution, and this will happen. And now it won't be a nice, smooth co-evolution. As he was saying, you have fits and starts. So there will be some fashion and his example is people firing, CIOs firing software engineers. And this is a fashion, it's a fits. It goes on for a while, and then they realize, oh, now we need to do something else. We'll add some new practices, probably hire some more engineers that do slightly different things. And this is kind of how things will happen. So, and this is how it always happened. This is how Agile happened. This is how DevOps happened. This is how any change that involved a socio-technical system happened. These things are not obvious to software engineers because we mostly focus on the technical part of it. But I think we need to be more and more aware of the social part of it as well. Because the way we coexist and co-evolve with AI is the way things will be for a long period of time. And part of it is out of our control because there are bigger forces at play. Like, if you don't want to use AI, I'm sorry. I think you don't have a big chance of doing that. So get used that you will need to use AI. But then the way we will use AI will depend on, we'll have something to say there, right? So this is my analysis of this post and my reaction. As usual, very thoughtful post by Simon Wardley. Follow him on LinkedIn. He's posting really interesting things. Learn about Wordly maps. They are very, very useful. And if you have any questions or comments, leave them in the comments below. I'd really like to have a conversation on this. Thank you kindly for the view, and until next time, remember to think, design, and work smart. See you next Saturday.